it's a really interesting point because it's almost got to the point now whereby masculinity is seen as a negative thing.
The strengths of masculinity and manhood, unfortunately, are being used against men at times. Normal masculine strengths or their ability to perhaps assert themselves being misconstrued. Attacking fathers, for example. When was it, about a year ago, I went to the beach reading a book, just relaxing, and the peace in the environment was disrupted by a lady in the background that started shrieking. Quite a lot of verbal barrage, and I quickly had a glance, and she was actually verbally abusing her husband, and it went on for quite a few minutes. What struck me from that was a couple of things. He actually assertively responded to her. I was quite impressed in his ability to assertively communicate back. And that was particularly important role modelling for their 5-year-old son that was also in the middle observing this verbal barrage. But the other component was her turning around to her son and saying, "Your father's an idiot." And hands down, that's just wrong. So there's this demeaning of the father role in insults like that, for example.
I'm horrified to hear that, and I'm more.
I was horrified to hear it.
Yeah, but I'm also more horrified reading through all of these notes to discover that abuse against men is a whole lot more common than we think.
It is. Australia really needs to have this conversation. Where women were many decades ago in terms of the silent phenomena of domestic abuse is really where men are at now. I'm not sure if you're aware, our own Australian Bureau of Statistics, there's a statistic in there that 70% of male victims experience assault by a female perpetrator in the home. And that's a higher number than the female victims at 64%. Why aren't we talking about those numbers?
Well,
Because
how's a man going to talk about that?
Yeah.
Where's he going to go? Is he going to go to some authority and say, my wife is beating me or something? Well, they're not going to be believed, are they?
Exactly. This is part of the social influences and the social determinants of health that we need to really put onto the table, particularly in looking at a national men's health policy, because of these kind of issues. The kind of abuse a man may experience by a female perpetrator, a woman's not likely to pack a punch the way a male would, for example, but women abusers, unfortunately, may be very good at sugar-coated viper tongues. So there'll be a lot of statements that are hit below the belt.
Like, your dad's an idiot.
Like your father's an idiot, or you think you're a man, or you think you're good in bed. Another example in social media that we see quite often, or you might hear quite often and don't bat an eyelid at, are things like on the radio a few weeks ago. This particular radio station had a wife calling in to tell her husband of over 10 years that he doesn't sexually satisfy her, and doing that over radio. And I just wonder, would the radio have had the husband do that to the wife?
Yes. You raise a very interesting point.
How would we react to that? And yet we sort of go, ha, that's funny. And yet, is it really? You're hitting men at an important part of their identity. Quite literally and metaphorically, you're hitting them below the belt. And it's very insulting to men.
We see it in the media often as well, don't we?
We see many images that we don't bat out an eyelid very much. So, away from the domestic front, we've got quite a few images, whether it be in video clips or commercials, that we kind of look at and go, oh, yeah. But if we were to reverse them, I wonder if we'd feel the same. So there's some examples we can look at here.
This is a Pink film clip. Now, she's being particularly aggressive towards this guy here.
Well, Pink's a great performer and she's got an awesome personality. I just want to hug her. We have a look at images like that, and
if that was reversed, we would be outraged.
It's totally acceptable. We don't question that.
There would be an uproar, but that's kind of entertainment that we're having a look at there and going, hang on a minute, that's actually inappropriate and unacceptable behaviour. And we're airing it. So that's an example there. That role modelling to young girls or young boys is quite frightening. And when you have a look at Canadian research where they're looking at adolescent girls and adolescent boys and partner aggression, about 34% of the young girls admitted to hitting, biting and scratching their partner, compared to 2.6% of the boys. And I think it was 18% of the girls used a weapon against their partner, compared to 0% of the boys using a weapon against their partner. That research also showed that young girls observing their mother being aggressive toward their partner, the young girls would also significantly report being aggressive. And so that kind of role modelling, we're missing the point. So there's a couple of other examples we can look at.
Yeah, it's about respect, isn't it, Elizabeth?
Basic civility and courtesy amongst people.
You know, and that whole concept of fighting fairly and not reducing a fight to personalised name calling.
It's really learning how to fight back fairly. That lady I mentioned earlier at the beach, she, quite professionally speaking, needed anger management training. And so it's the ability to be able to treat people to fight back, teach people to fight back fairly. That's what I teach a lot of men, in being able to learn assertive communication skills. And I'm glad to say women also coming to seek help to go, I don't want to behave that way. I know I can feel my viper tongue coming out, but I pull back. But how do I express my frustration? And that's absolutely brilliant, that people want to learn how to fight back fairly.
Let's take a look at another example of this concern in the media. This is a fairly common, I think it's a transport accident commercial?
It was about speeding, a transport accident, that's right. Now, we have a look at this. Now, it's making a point about speeding, obviously, but here they're making an issue about the size of his penis, obviously, and equating speed with his masculinity and insulting him. Now, I'm not particularly seeing any ads about speeding females and the size of their breasts and any connection to their brain, for example, of which we could come up with some pretty crude
You
images.
can imagine if there was a blonde woman driving the car and the blokes, looked at her and did that,
sort of going,
we would be offended.
Or what's going on? Like, are your brains in your breasts or something? I even cringe at saying it, but we would not put up with it. We would
wouldn't even happen.
Wait a
It
second.
is really
happen. It wouldn't be on the drawing board. It wouldn't be on the drawing board. And yet it gets to this point in these particular commercials, and we're looking at it going, you go, hang on a minute, that is inappropriate. And unacceptable behaviour between people, and yet men are really being oppressed by it, and we're accepting it more toward men, whereas we would have an uproar toward women. It's really demeaning, and it's not role modelling.
So emotionally, how are men responding to this? I mean, what's the impact?
Men have actually, unfortunately, they're aware of it, but there's, psychologically speaking, they've developed a learned helplessness in a sense, where it's just like, even if I do say something, I won't be taken seriously, or I'll be insulted, or I'll cop retaliation, or I'll cop the silent treatment. And as you were mentioning before, where do I go? Because when I report it, or I want to make a report, I'm either laughed at, or, come on, you're a bloke, be tough, or...
deal with it.
You mean she hits you? Nah, that's not possible.
What's wrong with it?
What's wrong with you? And men are even experiencing that I'm less of a man because of it, feeling quite shameful about it.
Because they're copping it.
But the thing with abuse toward men is that the abuse, verbal abuse, emotional manipulation, sexual manipulation, or using children as negotiating tools, they are forms of abuse that are hard to detect and they're hard to defend against. So it tends to seep under the skin psychologically, that someone ends up a little battered, so to speak, or helpless, doesn't know how to fight back, and in the end gets so frustrated that they're just trying to cope and maintain an identity.
So just wrapping this up, so the Men's and Fathers Health Summit in Canberra has now recommended a mandatory review of all legislation. How significant is that move?
That is a very important recommendation that they've made. A lot of us were really pushing for an Office for Men's status. Now, they didn't recommend for that, which I fully support that they didn't, given that there could be a risk of mismanagement with that. But the mandatory review of legislation and policy for its impact on men, for the reasons we've just discussed, are paramount, both on government policy level, domestic abuse front, and day-to-day level with some of the examples we've spoken about, because we're letting it slide and not stopping to question, saying, hang on a minute, if we had a man doing that to a woman and we showed that publicly, we would not accept it. Why are we accepting it for men? Why are we not questioning these things and having just as much of an uproar? They're important social determinants and social influences that are impacting on men's health, physically, psychologically, family and social-wise.
Tell you what, it's pretty shocking, isn't it? And that, of course, in no way takes away from abuse against women, but it's about recognising that it also happens with men.
Right,
There's an important point to make here on that one in particular, is that there's the automatic assumption that it's an us versus them, that if we're defending and helping out men in this, that it means we're taking away from women. That is so not the case. It's about it being unacceptable and inappropriate, and we need to look at these images now and go, hang on a minute,
that's not right.
That's inappropriate.
Elizabeth, it's really good to talk to you.
Always good to talk to you.
Thank you.
Talk
Thanks,
again.
guys.
Thank you.